Hey guys, welcome back to Human Condition. This video is another video in our philosophy series. This one is what is Aristotelian ethics? I thought this would be a pretty interesting one. You guys seem to really like the last two, the Socratic intellectualism and Plato's theory of the forms. So thank you guys so much for checking that out. But in today's video, I decided to talk about the third in succession of Socrates and Plato, which is Aristotle. This should be a pretty interesting one. There's four main topics from Aristotle's philosophies that we'll talk about in this video. Is the four causes, the golden mean, Aristotle's view of emotions, and Aristotle's view of virtue. Starting off with how Aristotle viewed virtue and how it differed from Socrates and Plato. Socrates, like we talked about in our last video, Socratic intellectualism, viewed things that the root of all evil comes from the mind. And I feel like I talked about Aristotle a little bit in previous Plato video. Aristotle agreed to this somewhat extent, and Plato did as well. But Aristotle believed not all goodness is just through knowledge, which kind of differed from Socrates. So that being said, virtue wasn't just based on what we know, but actually through our actions. And he believed to be a good, moral, virtuous person, it's not just about reaching a higher level of mindset or learning, becoming more knowledgeable, similar to like how Socrates believed, how Socrates viewed it. Although Socrates, to be fair, did kind of view it like if you know virtue, you're obviously going to act virtue, whereas Aristotle believed you can know what is virtuous, but doesn't mean you'll act that way. So he believed you have to know what virtue is, but you have to actively try to be virtuous to actually build a virtuous character. For example, tying this in with his second theory, the golden mean. Basically, he believed in not being extreme, no extremism. So he kind of viewed vices as two polar opposites. For example, good virtue would be like courage, hope, optimism, compassion, generosity. He believed the golden mean was the best way to find a virtue. For example, the vice would be to the extremes that are the opposite side of the virtue. For example, cowardice and arrogance, or being egocentric in the middle would be confidence. Or, for example, hope. This is a tough one, but like too little hope would be despair, or too much hope would be delusion, right? So the golden mean is not to be in despair or hopelessness or pessimism, but rather hope, but not too much hope that it becomes delusion, essentially. I guess would be a good example, in my opinion. So that's the golden mean. Virtue is found through impartiality between two extremes of something, which is pretty interesting, pretty cool. The second theory of Aristotle was how he viewed emotions that I was talking about in this video. Aristotle, it's kind of cool because each philosopher, you can see how philosophy developed over time. Started with Socrates, who was called people out, very based on learning new things and living a better life for oneself. Then Plato focused more on the unseen world, the abstract, theory of the forms. Now Aristotle would be the first philosopher who really built the foundation for materialism. In my opinion, I could be wrong. Socrates and Plato were very idealistic, helped build the formation of idealism, but Aristotle helped form the philosophical foundation of materialism. because he really helped form the idea of logic and looking to reality not through one's mind, but through reality to understand. Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates viewed using one's mind to understand reality, whereas Aristotle was using reality basically to understand reality or to understand one's mind. Also, this is my opinion, I feel like Socrates, I talked about this in previous videos, Socrates probably started off talking about trying to achieve internal peace and internal knowledge because potentially he might have been a little hesitant or afraid to talk about question reality or call people out on that because the pre-Socratics did so and were judged harshly. Sadly, eventually, even though him preaching about just living one's own best life and learning to examine and question the decisions and actions they do in life, he still was outcasted for that too. It was just a shame because he might have not, subconsciously might have tried to avoid that. Plato, you can kind of see this through Plato. Plato took probably through seeing what happened to Socrates, took a more, I'm going to teach this but not call people out on the things they do, the mistakes they make. And Plato did okay and built his own academy. And then Aristotle was actually the first philosopher who was actually kind of like almost like a not really, but a philosopher king in a way, because Plato talked about in the past, because he was an advisor to the king of Macedonia during the time, which is kind of crazy. So it went from something that was very rejected to the high philosophy, went to something that was rejected by officials to a high valued advisor role throughout the struggles that Socrates and Plato went through, and kind of built that legacy for Aristotle, which I think is kind of cool. But yeah, but after the Athenians overthrew the Macedonian reign over Athens, Aristotle had to run away because they were mad at him for supporting the Macedonian empire. Also, the four causes was an idea to understand how something can exist and why something exists, and it applies to all things. Aristotle believed there are four causes, the four causes being the material cause, the formal cause, the efficient cause, and the final cause. And this could be applied to all things, objects, people, etc. The material cause is what something is made out of. All things need something something is made out of. For humans, it's the brain, the heart. For a chair, it's like wood. These are the things that make up something, the material cause. The formal cause is the essence or the form, kind of like Plato's theory of the forms, the form of something. So what something is. For example, humans are made up of the brain, the heart, but the formal cause would be the human itself, the form. The efficient cause is who made something. So car would be like the manufacturer, human would be their parents, and final cause is why something was made. So a chair for people to sit, a car for people to drive, etc. So it suggests that everything that exists is made for four causes or four reasons, potentially. And the final thing, next two final things that Aristotle believed, in my opinion, how I viewed it when I was researching it. The five elements is pretty cool. He believed all things came from five elements, or were made from five elements. This would be fire, air, earth, water, and ether. Something called ether. I thought pretty interesting. And he believed that and he was kind of right to think about it, sort of. Like, I mean, sort of in a way. Because, like, you got air makes up a lot of things. Water makes up, like, even people have, like, 70% water or so. So that's not 100% inaccurate to say that almost everything is made up of fire, air, earth, and water. Just not 100%. And ether, he said, and he explained ether was the things that made up the celestial bodies in the heavens. For example, the thing that caused the celestial bodies to move around, he said the earth, but now we know it's the sun. But either way, the thing that the elements that helped the planets move around the sun, which is pretty interesting, pretty cool. The final thing is his view on emotions, and it's cool. The development of emotions can be seen throughout each philosopher. From Socrates not really mentioning emotions, Plato saying sometimes emotions can override our best judgments, and it's not always knowledge that causes evil, but emotions overriding what we know what is right and what we still do wrong, and emotions need to be controlled. However, Aristotle had a view of emotions that emotions aren't quite as bad as Plato kind of believed or viewed them, but rather that emotions didn't need to be controlled, but just need to be integrated, and that actually emotions were a key proponent to being virtuous, because without emotions, one would have no motivation to be loving, caring, giving. So, even though Aristotle's view of emotions were that not necessarily to try to control your emotions, but rather feel your emotions and try to understand why you felt those emotions, and to understand yourself, your emotions better, to handle those emotions and not control them, to healthily develop and grow and become more virtuous in character, rather than necessarily using logic to control them. If you express your emotions irrationally, take a second to think about those emotions and figure out why you felt that way, and maybe hopefully develop and not express those irrational emotions, and understand why those were irrational, and to feel comfortable enough to express when rationally, to basically understand when to express how you feel, instead of trying to control it all the time. And when it's justified to feel anger and justified to feel sadness. He kind of believed sometimes emotions were justified, but it had to be for reasonable reactions to certain situations. And a virtuous person would already naturally express, a person who's truly virtuous would already naturally know when to express positive emotions and when not to. Who cultivated virtue by learning through mistakes and trying to maintain better habits. He believed your habits defined who you are, in a way, which kind of probably set the framework for a lot of psychology in the future. So yeah, in conclusion, I hope Aristotle's beliefs. Aristotle really helped form the idea of materialism, and that it's important to look at the forms as how Plato viewed them, as well as immaterial things, but sometimes to observe not just the immaterial world that you connect through the mind, but actually the day-to-day world, and understand those that better through logical reasoning and thinking about what you observe, not always intuitively, but also think objectively and view your reality. And he really developed logic on how to think things through, and how to not just be virtuous through the mind, but virtuous through actions, and develop a good virtuous character. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, thanks again for watching. Like and subscribe if you want. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.